He believed it would be nothing more than a routine stop, an easy show of authority to break the monotony of a slow weekday shift. Officer Brock Reynolds allowed himself a faint smile as he snapped the cuffs around the wrists of the elderly black man in front of him, another reminder of who held power in this aisle on this day. The man had dared to question him over something as trivial as a receipt. What Reynolds didn't know was that the shaking hands he was forcing behind a bent spine belonged to Augustus Freeman, a man whose signature had shaped the very policing standards Reynolds was now trampling. By the time the officer grasped the gravity of his error, the body cam footage was preserved, legal papers were already drafted, and the cost of his arrogance had settled at precisely $1.3 million. The Oak Creek market glowed under harsh fluorescent lighting, accompanied by a faint electric hum that blended into the background for most shoppers. For Augustus Freeman, who had spent for decades attuned to every inflection of truth and deception in courtrooms, the sound barely registered. At 72, he moved carefully, each step deliberate. Age had softened his frame, but not his mind. His eyes, sharp behind thin wire glasses, missed very little. Today, however, nothing about him suggested the man once known as the Hammer of the South. A title earned during years on the bench, he wore a faded gray tracksuit, worn sneakers, and a knit cap pulled low against the crisp fall air. To anyone passing by, he was simply another elderly shopper debating milk choices. His cart held only a loaf of sourdough and a carton of eggs. He had already paid at the self-checkout, counting his change with care, a habit forged during a childhood where money was never guaranteed. As he neared the sliding doors, Augustus reached into his pockets and paused. He had forgotten his receipt. Turning back toward the kiosk, he moved stiffly, joints protesting with the familiar ache that preceded rain. That was when the voice cut through the store. "Stop right there." Augustus took another step, assuming the command was meant for someone else. "I said stop. Are you hard of hearing?" A heavy grip seized his shoulder, wrenching him around with enough force to nearly topple him. His heart stuttered as he grabbed a nearby cart to steady himself. The man looming over him was Officer Brock Reynolds, young, broad-shouldered, with a sharp jaw and eyes that carried the detached amusement of someone used to dominance. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming. He had arrived at the Oak Creek precinct only months earlier, bringing with him a reputation for initiative that others quietly avoided discussing. "Is something wrong, officer?" Augustus asked evenly, instinctively straightening his posture despite his casual clothes. "What's wrong is you trying to walk out without paying," Reynolds said, his thumb hooking into his belt near his taser. "I've been watching you, nervous, sloppy, thought being old would make you invisible." Augustus blinked, momentarily stunned by the accusation. "I paid for my items. I only returned for my receipt. Don't call me young man," Reynolds snapped, stepping closer, crowding him. "And don't play innocent. Guys like you think you can come into places like this and take whatever you want." The store grew quiet. Shoppers paused, eyes turning. Augustus felt the familiar weight of being watched, a weight he thought decades of progress had lifted. His voice lowered, calm but edged with steel. "I am not guys like me. I am a customer who has paid. If you allow me." "Hands behind your back," Reynolds cut in. He hadn't made an arrest all week. His supervisor wanted numbers. This was easy. "You're resisting. You're making a serious error," Augustus warned softly. "You have no probable cause. Touching me violates my constitutional rights." Reynolds laughed. "Another lawyer. Huh, I saw you. That's enough. Turn around." The store manager hurried over, wringing his hands. "Officer, is everything all right?" "Caught him stealing," Reynolds announced loudly. "Organic stuff. Classic." "Mr. Henderson," Augustus said, recognizing him. "I shop here every week." But Henderson hesitated. Without the robe, without authority, he saw what Reynolds framed a problem. He said nothing. Augustus inhaled slowly. He could end this. Instantly state his name, demand a call, invoke power. But the look in Reynolds' eyes stopped him. It wasn't confusion, it was certainty. The belief that nothing would happen to him. So Augustus stayed silent. "Fine," he said at last. Turning and placing his hands behind his back, Reynolds handled the rest like a performance. He spread Augustus's legs, yanked the cuffs tight too. Tight metal biting into fragile skin. "You're hurting me," Augustus said quietly. "Stop resisting." Reynolds barked, though Augustus stood motionless. As they passed the checkout, the machine beeped. A small white receipt fluttered to the floor. Reynolds never looked down. Reynolds shoved Augustus through the automatic doors and into the blinding afternoon light. forcing his face down against the hot metal hood of the patrol car. The judge inhaled sharply as heat pressed into his cheek. "You have the right to remain silent," Reynolds recited, his hands moving roughly as he searched Augustus with invasive, unnecessary force. "I plan to," Augustus murmured, his voice muffled against the steel. "I plan to remain silent until it matters." Round them, a small crowd gathered. Phones were raised. Some recorded openly. Reynolds noticed and straightened, chest puffed with pride. To them, he was the hero who had stopped a thief. He opened the cruiser door and shoved Augustus inside. The hard plastic seat offered no comfort. As the door slammed shut, sealing in heat and humiliation, Augustus closed his eyes. He wasn't afraid. He was cataloging every shove, every shouted lie, every violation of protocol. He was building a case brick by brick, and Brock Reynolds was unknowingly placing himself at the center of it. The ride to the 4th precinct was long and punishing. Augustus sat twisted in the back seat, his shoulders aching, his wrists numb where the cuffs cut circulation. Pins and needles crept into his hands, spreading upward into a deep, throbbing pain. In the front, Reynolds was relaxed. Music blared from the radio as he tapped the steering wheel. Riding the satisfaction of a good arrest, he lifted the radio handset casually. "Dispatch, unit for Alpha. I'm 1015 with one male suspect. Petty theft, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, bringing him in." The response crackled back, routine and unquestioning. Augustus stared out the window as familiar streets passed by. He had traveled these roads for decades, usually on his way to the courthouse, where he weighed lives, decided fates, enforced justice. He had sent criminals away for life and freed the wrongly accused. He was a respected elder, a church deacon, a donor, a man whose name carried weight. Now he was simply one male suspect. Reynolds glanced into the rearview mirror. "You're quiet," he said. "Usually you guys don't shut up. Always yelling about rights, screaming about your moms. I appreciate the silence. Makes things easier." Augustus said nothing. He focused on breathing evenly, refusing to give Reynolds the outburst he expected. The officer wanted confirmation of the narrative he had already written in his head. Augustus would not provide it. When the cruiser rolled into the precinct's garage, the heavy door closed behind them with a metallic thud. Reynolds yanked Augustus from the car, gripping his arm hard enough to bruise. "Move it, Grandpa." He snapped. Inside, the station smelled of stale coffee, floor cleaner, and despair. It was a scent Augustus remembered from his early career as a defense attorney, but experiencing it from this side felt disorienting. They approached the booking desk, where Sergeant Miller sat behind a computer, eyes dull with routine. "What have we got?" Miller asked. "Shoplifter," Reynolds said proudly, tossing Augustus's wallet onto the counter. "Tried to steal groceries. Got aggressive." Miller looked at Augustus, frail, gray-clad, silent. "Aggressive? Oh yeah," Reynolds replied smoothly. "Had to subdue him. I did not resist," Augustus said calmly. "And I did not steal." "Save it," Reynolds scoffed. "You can tell it to the judge." The irony nearly made Augustus smile. "Name?" Miller asked. "Augustus Freeman." Miller paused, the name stirring faint recognition. But context failed him. The man before him didn't fit the image in his mind. "Date of birth?" Augustus answered. Address followed. "The Heights," Miller repeated, looking up. "I reside at 400 for Crestview Drive," Augustus said. Reynolds laughed. "Sure you do. Put him down as transient." Miller hesitated, then typed the address anyway. "Empty your pockets." One cuff was removed. Augustus produced a handkerchief, a few hard candies, and a small notebook. Reynolds grabbed the wallet, rifling through it. "What's this?" he sneered, pulling out a gold card. "Country club membership. Who'd you steal this from?" "It's mine," Augustus replied. Reynolds tossed it into an evidence bag. "At possession of stolen property. That is my identification," Augustus said firmly. "Check the license." Reynolds glanced briefly. "Fake IDs are everywhere. Print him," Reynolds ordered. Then, holding cell 2, the process stripped away dignity piece by piece. Fingers pressed to glass, flashing lights, shoes removed, belt confiscated, pants held up awkwardly with one hand as he was marched down a concrete corridor. "One phone call," Augustus said. Yeah, Reynolds replied. "There's a phone inside." The cell door slammed shut. Inside, a young man sat on the bench, fear etched across his face. Augustus sat at the far end, rubbing his bruised wrists. "What are you in for?" the young man asked. "Buying bread," Augustus replied softly. The young man swallowed. "They got me for weed, just a joint." said it was intent to distribute. Augustus's gaze sharpened. Who arrested you? Reynolds. A quiet fury ignited inside Augustus. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. What's your name? He asked. Jamal. Jamal Davis. Augustus leaned closer, his voice steady and commanding. Listen carefully. Say nothing. Ask for a lawyer. Understand? I can't afford one. You won't need to. Augustus stood and walked to the phone, dialing a number etched into memory. When the line connected, his voice was calm. Dominic. It's Augustus Freeman. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Judge Freeman, Dominic Kane said carefully. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I am currently being held at the 4th Precinct. Augustus replied evenly. I was arrested for shoplifting. Silence followed thick, heavy, disbelieving. Did you say the 4th Precinct? Kane asked. I did. The arresting officer is Brock Reynolds. I've been charged with theft, resisting arrest, and he is attempting to manufacture an additional charge involving my own wallet. Kane exhaled slowly. Are you injured? My wrists are bruised, Augustus said. My dignity is worse, but my memory is intact. The sound of a chair scraping back came through the phone. Don't say another word to them, Kane said, his tone hardening. I'm on my way. Bring a camera, Augustus added, and call the district attorney. Kane didn't hesitate. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Augustus hung up and returned to the bench. Jamal looked at him with wide eyes. Someone coming? The young man asked. Yes, Augustus said softly. And today is about to change. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in the precinct shifted. It began as a subtle tension, a hush at the front desk, a stiffness in posture. Officer Reynolds sat at his workstation, feet propped up, typing his report with exaggerated confidence. He embellished freely, adding resistance, aggression, justifications for force. He smiled to himself, already picturing the commendation that would never come. The double doors opened. Dominic Kane entered like a blade slicing through fabric. He wore a tailored navy suit that radiated expense and intent. His stride was measured, precise. Behind him followed two associates carrying heavy briefcases, and a videographer holding professional equipment. Sergeant Miller froze mid-sip of his coffee. Every officer in the building knew Dominic Kane. He was the attorney who ended careers. I'm here for my client, Kane said calmly, placing his hand flat on the counter. Who's your client? Miller asked, already uneasy. Augustus Freeman. Miller frowned, checking the log. The shoplifter. The Honorable Augustus Freeman, Kane corrected, his voice rising just enough to carry. Senior Circuit Judge, the man who signs your warrants. The room went silent. Phone stopped ringing. Typing ceased. Reynolds spun in his chair. What's going on? Kane turned toward him slowly. Are you Officer Brock Reynolds? Reynolds stood, tugging at his belt. Yeah, and who are you? I'm Dominic Kane, he said. And I'm here to escort you into the defendant's seat. Reynolds laughed weakly. My suspect is a thief. You arrested a federal judge for purchasing bread, Kane said, enunciating every word, and you've held him without verification. Miller's fingers flew across the keyboard, his face drained of color. Oh no, he whispered. What? Reynolds demanded. It's him, Miller said. Judicial clearance. Level 5. It's Judge Freeman. Reynolds stared at the screen, the mugshot beside a formal portrait in robes. The blood left his face. He looked homeless. Reynolds muttered. He looked like a black man without power. Kane replied coldly. Kane gestured to his associate, who raised a sealed bag containing the receipt. We retrieved this. We also pulled store footage. It shows payment. It shows you initiating force without cause. Kane checked his watch. The district attorney is arriving now. The chief has been notified. Release my client. We need time. Miller stammered. You have 30 seconds, Kane said, or I add kidnapping to the federal filing. Get him out. Miller barked. Inside the cell, Augustus heard hurried footsteps. Judge Freeman. Miller said breathlessly. There's been a mistake. You're free. Augustus remained seated. I'm not leaving yet. Miller blinked. Sir, I want Officer Reynolds to remove these cuffs, Augustus said calmly. And I want an apology to me and to this young man. Miller wiped his face. Please, the chief is here. Then he can come down. Moments later, Chief O'Connor stormed in, his gaze locked on Reynolds. My office. Actually, Kane interrupted. He's needed in the cell. O'Connor understood immediately. Do it, he hissed at Reynolds. And if you say anything but sorry, you're finished. Reynolds walked like a condemned man. He unlocked the cuffs with trembling hands. I didn't know. He whispered. Ignorance isn't a defense, Augustus said, standing. It never was. He turned to Jamal. Come with us, as they Exited, the station watched in silence. The nightmare for Reynolds had only begun. When Augustus Freeman stepped out of the 4th precinct, the balance of power shifted instantly. Dominic Kane had not exaggerated. The press wasn't simply waiting, they were swarming. Cameras crowded the sidewalk. Microphones surged forward. Flashes erupted like lightning as the story detonated in real time. A clip from inside the station had already leaked online, spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Before Augustus reached the curb, the headline "Judge Arrested for Buying Bread" was trending nationwide. Questions were shouted from every direction. Judge Freeman, were you assaulted? Are you stepping down? What damages are you seeking? Augustus raised one hand. The noise fell away, silenced by instinctive authority. He stared directly into the nearest lens, his face worn but resolute. Today, he said evenly, I was not treated as a citizen, nor as a servant of the law, but as a suspect judged solely by appearance. If this can happen to me, imagine what happens to those without my resources or voice. He paused. Today was an error. Tomorrow will be accountability. He offered nothing further and stepped into Kane's waiting vehicle, leaving chaos behind. By morning, the city was engulfed. Video footage captured by a teenager inside the grocery store had surpassed 17 million views overnight. The footage was damning. No provocation, excessive force, public humiliation. In City Hall, the mood turned grim. Mayor Gregory Holt paced across his office rug, phone calls stacking up unanswered. City Attorney Martha Vine scanned a preliminary liability report, her expression tightening. How bad? Holt asked. It's catastrophic, Martha replied. Freeman isn't just a judge. He's untouchable in public perception. And Reynolds, she paused. This isn't his first complaint. It's his 12th. Holt stopped. 12. Excessive force, profiling, illegal searches. We settled the last quietly. Holt rubbed his temples. We need this gone. I've scheduled a meeting with Kane, Martha said. We offer a settlement. How much? 50,000, maybe 75. Holt nodded. Do it. 2 hours later, in the polished conference room of Kane and Associates, the two sides sat across from one another. Augustus wore his judicial robes, a deliberate reminder. Kane didn't bother with pleasantries. We regret the incident, Martha began. We're prepared to offer an apology and a settlement of $50,000, contingent on a non-disclosure agreement. Kane laughed softly. He didn't read the document. He dropped it into the trash. You insult my client, he said calmly. This is a standard. You arrested a judge. You shackled him. Then you fabricated charges. What do you want? Martha snapped. Reynolds fired immediately. Kane replied. A federal review of the 4th precinct. And $1.3 million. Martha stared. That's extortion. It's a reckoning, Augustus said quietly. 100,000 for each complaint you ignored. We'll see you in court, Martha said. Standing. Check the news first, Augustus replied. We just released Jamal Davis's interview. Martha froze. The discovery phase that followed stripped the 4th precinct bare. Kane demanded everything: text, footage, GPS logs. Boxes arrived daily. Augustus combed through them relentlessly. 3 months in, he found the pattern. Dominic, he said softly, every Tuesday and Thursday, same location, same rests. He's hunting, Kane muttered, and stealing, Augustus replied. Cash seizures, no evidence. Charges dropped, money gone, and Miller signs off. Kane realized it wasn't a bad cop. It was an operation. Reynolds' deposition ended what little hope he had left. When bank records surfaced, the truth collapsed inward. I plead the 5th, Reynolds whispered. You don't get to, Kane replied. The FBI was waiting when he left the courthouse. The city panicked. Unable to win legally, officials turned to character assassination. A tabloid ran a smear, twisting a decade-old ruling into corruption. Lies spread fast. Augustus read the article in silence. They want me to disappear, he said to his wife. They've forgotten who I am. Reynolds, isolated and abandoned, cracked. When Kane's phone rang near midnight, he answered immediately. I have proof. Reynolds slurred. The ledger, everyone's in it. An hour later, the FBI took custody of the book. By morning, City Hall was rated live on television. Arrests followed. Careers ended. The lawsuit ended without trial. $1.3 million. Augustus never smiled. Set up a foundation, he told Kane. Every dollar goes to protecting the powerless. Months later, Augustus returned to Oak Creek Market. He paid. He took his receipt. A young officer stopped him. I'm sorry, the officer said, and thank you. Do better, Augustus replied, and for the first time in years, justice felt balanced. 6 months later, Augustus Freeman walked once more through the sliding doors of Oak Creek Market. The doors opened smoothly, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights filling the space. This time, the sound didn't irritate him, it felt ordinary. Safe, normal Dotmer. Henderson spotted him immediately from behind the customer service desk. He rushed over, nearly tripping in his haste. "Judge Freeman, sir, welcome back. Please, let me get you a card, whatever you need, anything at all. I'm just here for bread," Augustus said with a faint, knowing smile. "And perhaps milk, of course, on the house." "No," Augustus said firmly. "I will pay, and I will take my receipt." He moved down the produce aisle, unhurried. He reached for the sourdough loaf. "Excuse me, sir." Augustus froze. For a fraction of a second, memory surged the cuffs, the heat, the cell. His pulse spiked as he turned slowly. A young police officer stood behind him, fresh-faced, nervous, his uniform crisp. The officer removed his cap and looked down before meeting Augustus's eyes. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," the officer said, "for what happened to you, and thank you. Because of you, they changed the training. They're teaching us better now." Augustus studied him. He saw sincerity. He saw possibility. "Do better," Augustus said quietly, placing a hand on the officer's shoulder. "That's all I ask." The officer nodded and walked away. Augustus placed the bread in his cart. He checked out. He paid. He took his receipt. And he stepped into the warm sunlight, free for the first time in a long while. The scales felt balanced. This story of Judge Augustus Freeman is a reminder that authority without accountability is nothing but tyranny. That even the smallest act of prejudice can topple the largest systems of corruption. Officer Brock Reynolds believed he was crushing a powerless old man. Instead, he awakened a force that dismantled an entire network of abuse. The $1.3 million was not a reward, it was a penalty, and Augustus ensured it became a shield for others, not a trophy for himself. Dignity is not granted by a badge, it is inherent. And when you strip it from someone, you must be prepared for the consequences. Karma does not always arrive quickly, but when it does, it arrives with weight. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like the video. It helps more than you know. Share it with anyone who believes no one is above the law. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Let me know in the comments, was $1.3 million enough? Or should justice have demanded more?